Alrighty, folks, welcome back to Technical Knockout, the MMA podcast. I'm your host, as always, Hussein, and today we are going to be talking about UFC Fight Night Macau, Yan versus Figueiredo. There's also on the card Yan Xiaonan versus Tabitha Ricci, and a couple of other pretty exciting fights that the UFC has put together for their, I believe, second trip to Macau, and maybe their third or fourth overall to China as it stands. Thank you so much for tuning in. Appreciate y'all, appreciate the love. We just hit 500 subscribers on the YouTube, so I'm just incredibly grateful and beside myself, honestly, seeing that number reach that, considering, what this podcast has been through and what we started with and where we're at today. I'm incredibly grateful. So thank you so much for subscribing, and for watching and following my content, man. I really appreciate y'all, So let's do a quick little recap of UFC 309, Jones versus Miocic, before we get into Yan versus Figueiredo. There is a very exciting fight, Yan versus Figueiredo. I'm really pumped for it. I'm excited to break it down. But first, let's clean house as far as last week's pay-per-view is concerned. Alright, so main event, UFC 309. Jon Jones defends his heavyweight belt against Stipe Miocic, against the ghost of Stipe Miocic. He looked amazing, honestly. Jones looked incredible. I feel like I may have undersold his capabilities in the past, and my disdain for the guy has kind of clouded my judgment. I mean, of course, I did pick him in the preview podcast, but I didn't see him getting the knockout. I thought he would get a submission or a decision victory here. I am not surprised that the fight went to the third round, considering the time off that both guys had. But Jones is just ferocious in every facet of the fight. When he got on top, he started throwing those elbows. My goodness, it was bad. Even just like the elbows in the clinch, little shots in tight, The guy is just constantly looking for things, and he sees everything that his opponent has offered him. So, just an incredible performance from the champion. I'd love to see him fight Tom Aspinall. I really hope they get that fight done, because now after seeing Jones' form, I do feel like it's a lot closer of a fight than I initially thought it would be. Aspinall is a fucking monster. And I think he poses a lot of really interesting problems to Jones, but I do feel like Jones could deal with those problems, honestly. But we'll have to see it to find out. So I'm excited. Hopefully they make that fight happen before the earth falls off of a cliff or whatever, before the sun burns out. And if they don't make that fight, that's fine with me too. I don't care. I just want to see Tom Aspinall fight for the undisputed belt. Whoever has it, or if he has to fight somebody else, and then the fight, the winner of that is made undisputed champion, that's fine with me. I'm cool with that. I just want Aspinall to fight for that belt. He deserves it. For Stipe, incredible career, awesome retirement in the most Stipe way possible. Just fuck it, I'm done. I love it. I wouldn't expect anything less from our, championship firefighter coming out of Cleveland, Ohio. The guy's an absolute legend. He deserves everything he's ever gotten. He's worked hard for it, and just a great story. And it'll be a fun career retrospective to go down memory lane and check out Stipe's career. A guy who I think was constantly counted out, and showed a very wide range of skills to get to the championship, to defend the championship, and ultimately reclaim it from Daniel Cormier. So, I think storybook career, certainly a first ballot Hall of Famer. I don't even know if MMA Hall of Fame works like that, but, if there was a first ballot, he'd be on it. For Jones, solid win, but I really feel like we didn't learn much. We just kind of got reminded of how good he is. Yeah, I mean, it is what it is, Solid dub there for Jones. Next, we had Charles Oliveira versus Michael Chandler. I did not expect this fight to go the distance. I said on the preview pod that I thought it could, and I immediately retracted my statement. I was like, actually, I don't know if it will. I don't think it can, but it did. This looked a lot like the first fight in the terms of the fighters haven't evolved much, but they both have gotten older. And Oliveira, I think, in his age and his wisdom, has learned that he doesn't need to take these punches in the face to get the fight going. He can just get his wrestling game going. His wrestling game is very solid. His jiu-jitsu obviously is very credentialed. He has the most submissions in UFC history, if I'm not mistaken. So, the guy, he has that A game, and he has the tools to get there now with his wrestling improving over the last few years. And he just kind of exploited Chandler's defensive weaknesses on the ground and just kind of held position there. Had some good work on the feet. Chandler did good work in the 5th round, rocking Oliveira a couple times, and then he had that awesome, when Oliveira was on his back, he kind of it was like a throwback to the first fight where he jumps backwards and slams Oliveira. And he did it again. It was sick. He did it twice. It was awesome. It was really cool. So although Chandler's not going to be fighting for a belt anytime soon, he turns in a very exciting performance. I mean, take that soundbite. Although Chandler's put on a very exciting fight, he's not going to be fighting for the belt anytime soon. Take that soundbite and apply it to any UFC fight that Chandler's had, and it applies. So the guy, you know what you're going to get when you get a Michael Chandler fight, and it's really exciting typically. So, on brand. Oliveira, I'm not really sure where he goes from here. I think just keep taking fun fights. I don't see him having much for Sarukian or Islam if they make those rematches. But, if he keeps beating guys, what are you going to do? You have to give him that shot. So, I mean, I think he finds himself in kind of a Max Holloway, Volkanovski situation. Especially now with Topuria being Sarukian. But we'll see what happens. Yeah, I mean, not terribly divisionally relevant, but still pretty cool fight, the way it shook out. Bo Nickel beat Paul Craig in probably one of the worst fights I've ever seen. I like Bo Nickel taking the... I think these prospects need cage time. If he just smoked Paul Craig in a minute and a half, we wouldn't have learned anything. It's not like we learned much from him there, but I'm sure that experience is very valuable right now to get that cage time in against a veteran like Paul Craig. He had him hurt at some point, I think in the 3rd round, and then put his foot on the brake. I thought it was really stupid, but it is what it is. As somebody who bet on the Bo Nickel knockout, I was upset, but as a fan of Bo Nickel's career, I think it's important for him to get those minutes in now, and against somebody who's not that threatening, honestly, like Paul Craig, I think it was a great idea. So, solid dub there for Bo Nickel, and he continues to grow. He's only had like 6 or 7 fights, Give the guy some time. Viviana Araújo beat Karina Silva in a very close fight that came down to like the last grappling exchange where Silva just was so exhausted and couldn't finish out on top. So big underdog spot there for Viviani. We did not do great on the betting slip. We went 3-5, unfortunately, going back in the loss column after a nice win streak, but it is what it is. That fight was one of the ones that could have went either way, but our fighter kind of shit the bed in the last second, so it is what it is. Mauricio Ruffy versus James Yontop, I should say. This fight was crazy. I thought for sure Ruffy could have got that knockout in the 2nd round. It was very close. I mean, if it wasn't Kevin McDonald reffing, I think any other referee would have stopped that fight. But Kevin McDonald is not the sharpest tool in the shed. I had money on the 2nd round knockout for Mauricio Ruffy, so it was a heartbreaker. But I think again in kind of in the same realm of Bo Nickel, I think it's good for this guy to get some minutes under his belt, some cage time, some experience. And I do think that if this fight wasn't at a catchweight, I think if Yontop had cut the weight to 55, we would have been looking at a finish here. But he had that extra weight on him. He was able to take the punches a lot better than he was supposed to, or than he would have normally. And made a pretty good showing for himself. Mauricio Ruffy didn't have this stellar performance, but he looked good in there. He looked creative, as we've always known him to be. He landed some cool shots. For me, out of the Fighting Nerd camp, I think he's the one that I have the least, has the least title aspirations or ambitions in my book. I think at the top of the list is Kyle Baralho for sure. I think he has championship potential 100%. Next, I would go John Silva. Then I would go Carlos Prates. Or those guys are kind of interchangeable because I do feel like Prates is in a better position to get to the belt, but John Silva has a much deeper division to go through. Um, so those guys are both very solid 2A 2B, and then I would put Ruffy at the 4 spot comfortably. Um, but the Fighting Nerds they have a great thing going right now. They had Elon Musk putting on the glasses at the event, so I think they're gonna be like the next big thing. And I'm gonna do a video breaking down each of the fighters' styles, or at least the 4 most prominent fighters that I just mentioned, being Ruffy, um, Borralho, Pratis, and Silva. Yeah, Ruffy had a very solid performance there, and I think we learned a little bit more about his skill set. Seems to be kind of the guy that just takes advantage of the situation rather than coming in with a dead set game plan. That's going to work until it doesn't. So we'll see if he can learn a lot from this performance and put things together and get a finish in his next fight. But I have faith in the guy. Marcus McGee turned in a great performance against Jonathan Martinez, who really looked gun shy. And I think the first and second round of this fight kind of felt like the fourth and fifth round of the Aldo fight that he had, where he was just fighting somebody. This is a tough matchup for Martinez in hindsight. I picked McGee in the free preview pod, but it just became all the more apparent during the fight. As I'm a fan of both guys, so I was expecting a competitive fight, and we got that. But Martinez has a lot of trouble when he's fighting a big hitter, and certainly a big hitter who is technically strong. Like McGee and Aldo both have the stopping power in their punches to really, disrespect Martinez's striking, for lack of a better term, and they have the technique to block, deflect, or evade what he throws back at them, and not be afraid of it. And McGee put on a great performance the first and second round, just landing the heavier punches and kicks. Third round, though, in the end of the second round and going into the third round, Martinez started to land some really good low kicks and hurting McGee. And you can't help but feel like if there was a fifth and fourth round, it'd be a much different fight, because by the end of that third round, it was very hard for McGee to even stand on that leg. It was just too little too late for Martinez, and McGee gets another victory here. His first by decision, I believe, or at least his first in the UFC by decision. So I had McGee over 1.5, so I was very happy with the outcome. For Martinez, I really feel like, it's not too bad of a setback considering that moral victory of winning that last round. And I think he'll be back in there relatively soon against another tough guy. Maybe Kyler Phillips. I think that'd be a good fight. Did they fight before? I kind of feel like they have. But, Kyler Phillips coming off of that loss to Rob Font, I think it's a good matchup. Yeah, they haven't fought. Wow, Martinez has been in the UFC for a long time, since 2018. I didn't realize. So, yeah, I think Kyler Phillips versus Martinez makes all sense in the world. For McGee, I'd like to see him get that top 10 crack at somebody. I don't know. There's a lot of fighters you could put him against, but it's just anybody in that top 10, top 15 at bantamweight. It's a Shark Tank right now. Batista is obviously his training partner, so you can't match him up there, but there's a lot of guys that McGee can do good work against in the top 10 there. Maybe Rob Font. That'd be a good fight. So yeah, going further down the card, Jim Miller got it done. Our boy A10 getting shit done. First round submission, as is tradition. I had Miller to win this fight. I picked him first or second round as well, so the ticket cashed there. David Onama, not really much more to talk about that fight. It was a Jim Miller first round finish. Damon Jackson looked okay, and then he shot for a sloppy takedown and got guillotined. It is what it is. David Onama beat Roberto Romero. This guy, Roberto Romero, was fucking tough, dude. He was tough. He was taking some big punches from Onama, coming back with his own. He had a very good argument to win that first round, but then got dropped at the end of it, and I think lost it. He lost on all the judges' scorecards, but it was really close, man. He had a great showing for himself for being a plus 1,000 favorite or underdog or whatever he was. Marcin Tybura did his goddamn thing against Jonathan Deniz. Man, I love Tybora's style. I really do. Kind of reminds me of Alexei Oleinik in a weird sense, because he's like this slow, plodding heavyweight who will get hurt on the feet, but if he gets to the top position, he's just so smothering. And, in Tybora's favor, he's a much more threatening top fighter than Oleinik was, with his ground and pound, with his elbows, with his positional control. So in that sense, it's different, but it's the same thing where it's like I'm like so nervous, and then he gets a takedown. I'm like, oh, thank God he got it. Like, let's go. Like, good work now. You know what I mean? It's gonna be good work coming from Tybura on top, and that's what he did against Deniz, and I was really happy to see him get it done, man. Again, we picked Tybura, so the ticket cash is there. For Deniz, I do feel like this was the fight that It was a litmus test for him. He's a great striker, and he has pretty good defensive grappling, honestly. But against somebody who has so much experience and the tools to plug the holes that Denise has showed, I think Denise had as good a performance as you could have against somebody who was such a bad stylistic matchup for him. So, give him some time off, heal up from that cut. That cut was really bad. That's what stopped the fight. And I think we see Denise get back in there and do some good work against the next guy. But for Tybura, keep that spot. You know what I mean? And keep doing your goddamn thing. I love you, Marcin Tybura. You're my fucking guy. Ramiz Brahimaj knocked out Mickey Gall in the first round. I did not expect that. I think they said the odds were like plus 2,200 for the first round knockout from Brahimaj. I thought Gall was going to be much tougher in there. It is what it is. And then the biggest heartbreak of the card, Oban Elliott got the knockout against Basel Hafez in the third round. This was such a tough matchup for my boy Basel, man. It was a really hard fight for him, like stylistically. When they made the matchup, I was worried about it because Elliott kind of has the tools to, take advantage of where Hafez is not solid, or where he's lacking, I should say, of his holes. He has good takedown defense. He has good backwards movement. He has good cardio, and he's very accurate and has high volume. And he used those tools against Hafez to kind of keep him out of the fight. Hafez did land a good head kick at one point and landed a couple good punches, but Elliott's movement and chin and cardio and volume, and yeah, it just it wasn't fun. It was a heartbreaker, man. Honestly, it sucked. But I know Hafez is going to be back in there soon, or not too soon. Hopefully, he takes some time off and rest up and heal up. But I know the next guy that he is signed to fight against he's gonna be in for a long night. So I'm rooting for you, Basel. Feel better, my boy. I'm sure. It's nothing crazy. It's nothing you haven't been through before. So yeah, get back to the drawing board, and hopefully we get back in the win column on the next one. For Elliott, solid dub, and he keeps climbing up the ranks. I'm really not sure who to match him up against, but I expect good things from Oban Elliott. He's a very solid fighter. Eduardo Mora beat Veronica Hardy in a fight that it was hard for Hardy to kind of get into. Third round she won, but I thought her striking and her grappling would be a lot more of a threat to Mora. I thought Mora would get tired quicker. So good on Mora to shore up some of those cardio difficulties or cardio issues and get that convincing victory on the scorecards there. All right, that out of the way, UFC 309 out of the way. Let's go to UFC Fight Night Macau, China. We got Petr Yan versus Deiveson Figueiredo. This is an awesome fight, man. This is a really good fight. A fight that I've been wanting for a long time since they announced that Figueiredo was going down to bantamweight. Going up to bantamweight. This is a matchup that has always sounded very tasty to me. I want to see Figueiredo. First off, I love seeing champ versus champ, regardless of how far removed they are from their belts. So here we have the former flyweight champ versus the former bantamweight champion. They were champions at the same time at one point, so that fight realistically could have happened at some point if they weren't both tied up in their own divisions. And I do feel like we're seeing two fighters who are kind of trending in opposite directions in this fight. Yan, coming off of victory over Song Yadong, a very convincing victory, but a very close competitive fight for sure. And before that, losing 3 in a row to Aljamain, Merab, and Sean O'Malley. That O'Malley fight was very close, as we all know. So was the Alja fight, but the Merab fight was not close at all. He got absolutely washed out in that fight. So Yan has been not in his best form lately. On the other hand, Deiveson Figueiredo has been in amazing form lately, rattling off 3 wins against, perennial contenders in Rob Font, former champion Cody Garbrandt, and former title contender Marlon Chito Vera. You got to think that the winner of this fight is going to be next in line for the title shot after Umar and Merab settle their differences and Sean and Corey do their thing. So huge title implications for this matchup, and stylistically, I think it's a very compelling fight. So on one side, you have Petr Yan, who is a slow starter, makes the reads, as everybody says, as the fight goes on, has devastating striking, has really good grappling too, solid wrestler, solid defensive wrestler, but can certainly fall victim to a volume-heavy style, as we saw in the O'Malley and Merab fights. He had a bit of trouble with the length of O'Malley. He had a lot of trouble with the volume and pace of Merab. Now, these are tools that Figueiredo doesn't necessarily bring to the table. Figueiredo is he has really good wrestling, but that's not really his A game. His A game is his pull counter style of striking, where he lands big straights, um, and moves well, sticks and moves, and kind of he's really good at winning the minutes of the fight. This is something that has kind of been a recent development for him because he came up in flyweight as a one-shot knockout guy. He was the only guy at flyweight at the time, besides like John Lineker, who was deading dudes with one punch. So that was a big tool for him, and it wasn't until he fought Moreno, whose head is made out of cement, that he wasn't able to knock out, and he had to kind of switch up the game plan a little bit and win rounds in that second fight that they had, I believe it was, where Figueiredo won by decision. He showed those wrinkles to his game by using the wrestling, by using the striking to win minutes rather than win exchanges or knock out the other guy. Maybe it was the third fight, because the first fight was a draw. The second one, I think, was a Moreno finish, and then the third fight was the Figgy decision. Yeah, and the fourth fight was the Moreno eye finish, like where he closed up Figueiredo's eye. But anyway. So it's a very interesting matchup in that sense because Figueiredo, I believe his A game or his best path to victory in this fight would be to kind of take a page out of Merab's book and win the first, or maybe a page out of Aljamain's book, I should say, and win the first 3 rounds or so on wrestling control. Because when Figueiredo does get on top, he has a very dominant top control. It's not very easy to wrestle Petr Yan. Even Merab, who is a phenomenal wrestler and obviously the champion of the division. He had to attempt like something like 49 takedowns, and he only landed like 8 or 9. Obviously, Merab is much more of a takedown machine than a top control player. When Yan fought a great top control player in Aljamain Sterling, Aljamain was able to win the first round on slightly more volume, win the second and third with the back control. If Figueiredo can employ that kind of game plan, I think he can win this fight. However, I think it's much more likely that Figueiredo is not able to get to the takedowns as readily available as Aljamain or Merab was. I think it's much more likely that Yan is much faster than Figueiredo when he warms up into this fight in that third, fourth, and fifth round. I think it's going to be really bad for Figueiredo. Figueiredo is somebody who has kind of slowed down as the fight goes on. Yes, it's an issue that was more prevalent early in his career. I think it's something that he's worked on tremendously. But even still, in the third round, he doesn't look as fresh as he does in the first. And now we're going to have 5 rounds, which I do expect this fight to go 5 rounds, if not go into the 4th or 5th round. And I think Yan is going to keep building as the fight goes on. To make a long story short, it's hard for me to pick against Yan in any 5-round matchup when the other guy doesn't have a clear advantage over him in some capacity. Even, the 2 fights that he lost that went 5 rounds in Merab and Aljo, Merab took him out of the fight completely by just overwhelming him and overloading him with information. And for Aljamain, it was a very close fight that he won on 2 takedowns essentially in the second and third round, where, when Aljo gets your back, he's not letting go. I don't think we can really say the same for Figueiredo. We haven't seen him have that kind of dominant control on the ground. He has had fights where he controls the other guy on the ground very well, namely the Moreno fight and the most recent example being the Cheeto fight. But Moreno and Cheeto are guys, Moreno not so much, but Cheeto is a guy who that's kind of been an issue for him his whole career, is takedown defense and, being ground out from the top. So, yeah, more than anything, I think Figueiredo's biggest improvement since going up to bantamweight has been his game planning and his fight IQ. We're seeing a guy who had to do a lot to win the belt back, and I think that quadrilogy, whatever they fucking call it, the 4 fights that he had, the series of fights that he had with Brandon Moreno, has leveled up Deiveson Figueiredo immensely, and more than anything, he's learned how to win fights because of that series. So knowing that he's going to come in here with a good game plan, that he's going to come in here with good fight IQ, and that he does have the tools to beat Jan if he's on his best game, I think we get a very competitive fight on Saturday. I think it's going to be very competitive, but I have to side with Jan because I think that those last two rounds are certainly going to go to Jan, and it's really just a matter of if he can get the first, second, or third round out of the way. If he can, which in his last fight he showed up in the second round instead of the third, if he can get an early round, I think this is going to be Jan's fight all day. Probably by decision, but I'll take Jan over 2.5 to play it safe. Now, going down the card, we have Yan Xiaonan versus Tabitha Ricci. This is another very exciting fight with title implications. You have the woman who is coming off of a title challenge to Zhang Weili in Yan Xiaonan. And she's fighting Tabitha Ricci, who is pretty much the biggest prospect coming into this division for the last few years, coming off of victories over Tisha Pennington and Angela Hill, and before that losing a very close decision to Lupi Godinez. Tabitha Ricci brings a very well-rounded game to the octagon, but her biggest tool in all of her fights is her grappling, and Yan Xiaonan, her biggest weakness is her grappling. That being said, Yan Xiaonan is devastating on the feet. She's really shown this new wrinkle in her game the last few years of adding tremendous power to her punches. We saw her hurt Zhang Weili bad in their fight. If you guys don't remember this fight, this was right after Holloway Gaethje on UFC 300. It was an absolute adrenaline dump of a fight, that Holloway Gaethje. It was incredible. Going into this fight, I think all the energy in the room was taken out. The Yan and Weili fight, but that fight was fucking amazing. Weili versus Xiaonan is an amazing fight. Highly recommend that you guys go back and watch it if you don't remember what happened. It was essentially Yan Xiaonan beating the shit out of Weili on the feet, and then Weili beating the shit out of Yan Xiaonan on the ground. So if Ricci can get this fight to the ground, I expect her to have a lot of success. This is something that has plagued Yan Xiaonan throughout her career, is her grappling defense and her takedown defense. Most famously, she got finished by Carla Esparza, who hasn't even finished a combo meal in years. But throughout her career, it's been something that smart fighters have been able to take advantage of in Yan Xiaonan's game. If Ricci cannot get to the grappling, she kind of had trouble getting to the grappling against Angela Hill. If she can't get to the grappling against Yan Xiaonan, I expect it to be a very long night for Ricci. I think Yan is much quicker on the feet. I think she's going to land some really big punches in the pocket, especially. And, I expect this fight, it's kind of a two-true outcome. It's either going to be Ricci taking her down over and over, or Yan Xiaonan beating the piss out of her on the feet and probably getting a finish, if not winning a very lopsided decision. So it's a fight that I'm really excited for, that I really don't know how to pick. So I'm going to stay away from this one for sure. I'm just really excited to see how it shakes out. Song Kenan versus Muslim Salikhov. This is a fight that I am extremely confident in Muslim Salikhov in. Song Kenan, in his last fight against Ricky Glenn, had Glenn dead to rights and could not get the finish. He just could not find that knockout blow. And for me, if you're fighting Muslim Salikhov and you can't knock him out, you can't seriously hurt him, you're not going to win a decision against him. There's only been one guy who won a decision against him, and that's Nicholas Dalby, who is an absolute anomaly in every sense of the word. The guy turns up more and more as the fight goes on. You cannot say the same for Song Kenan. Song Kenan is a bit sloppy on the feet. He fades as the fight goes on, and I expect Muslim Salikhov to have the cleaner striking. I don't think this fight will go to the ground. I think it's going to be on the feet the whole time. I expect a kickboxing fight from the two guys, and I think Muslim Salikhov is going to be the better fighter. I think he's going to be slicker. I think he's going to land the better shots. He might not win every round, but I expect him to be able to win at least two against Song Kenan. So give me Salikhov by decision. Now you have Wang Kong versus Gabriela Fernandez. Wang Kong dressed up like the Joker in her last weigh-in and then knocked out Victoria Leonardo in the first punch she threw in like 30 seconds. About as good a UFC debut as you could get. She's taking on Gabriela Fernandez, who has had a few fights in the UFC, has not looked stellar, but has very good striking and a very solid chin. And if anything, the biggest hole in her game is her grappling and her grappling defense. Now, Wang Kong is a kickboxer. She's not much of a grappler. She does have a couple submissions on her record, but from what I've seen, she doesn't like to employ the wrestling offensively. So I expect this fight to stay on the feet. And I expect Wang Kong to have, with her breadth of experience, I expect her to have her way with Gabriela Fernandez on the feet. Now, that being said, Fernandez is a much tougher opponent than Victoria Leonardo, and I don't think she's going to get knocked out in the first punch. I don't think she's going to get knocked out with the second or third punch either. She seems to be very defensively responsible on the feet, and when she does take a punch, she can take it very well. So I'm going to play the over here. I'm going to take Wang Kong over 1.5. She might get the finish late in the fight, or she might just win a decision. But I expect Fernandez to be a tough opponent for her and take some punishment before going down if she ever does go down. So give me Kong and give me Kong over 1.5. You got light heavyweight Volkan Ozdemir versus Carlos Ulberg. This is a good matchup here. Sneaky good fight in the middle of the main card here. Carlos Ulberg, great kickboxer, moving backwards, lands check hooks, lands jabs off the back foot, training out of city kickboxing with guys like Israel Adesanya, Kai Kara France, etc., etc. And he takes on Volkan Ozdemir here, who is a former title challenger, and on a little bit of a win streak himself, knocking out Johnny Walker in his last fight, if I'm not mistaken, yeah, and submitting Bogdan Guskov in the fight before that. So coming off of 2 first-round finishes, no time is sort of having a renaissance to the name, and he draws a very tough matchup here in Carlos Ulberg. Now, Ulberg, not a perfect fighter by any means, but a very solid one. Had a tough fight with Dao Jung 2 fights ago, but got the submission, believe it or not, in the last round. In a fight that he was handedly winning, he found the choke. Before that, knocked out Ihor Portieria, Nikolai Negumereanu, and Tefan Nchukwi. And most recently, KOing Alonzo Menefield, who just had the worst game plan I've ever seen against Ulberg by crashing into him immediately as the fight goes on. We're talking Kat Zingano versus Ronda Rousey levels of bad game planning. So, didn't learn a ton from Ulberg in that fight, and I was very excited to see what Menefield could do if the fight would, withstand a bit. For Ozdemir here, I do believe that Ozdemir is the best striker that Ulberg has fought in the UFC. Ozdemir has a kickboxing background of his own, very power-punching Dutch kickboxing style. I don't know how that's going to play well into Ulberg's game, because Ulberg, like we said, is a very sharp counterpuncher and moves very well. So if Ozdemir cannot land the knockout punch, because it has shown, we've seen Ulberg kind of get rattled by big punchers before. We've seen, I think he got knocked out by Kennedy and Zenjiku, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, his one loss is to Kennedy and Zenjiku by knockout in a fight that he got exhausted in. If Ozdemir can take this fight a little bit later, wear on the gas tank of Ulberg with some body kicks. Ozdemir has really good body kicks. If he can do that, I can see him taking over as this fight goes on. But more likely than not, I do think Ulberg is going to be in the driver's seat this fight. I think he's going to be a little bit slicker than Ozdemir. I think he's going to be able to fight on the back foot and kind of corral Ozdemir, where Ozdemir is going to get frustrated and have to crash in and eat some shots on the way in because of that. But I expect this to be a very exciting fight, and I expect it to be a fight on the feet for sure. I'm leaning towards the side of Ulberg, but honestly, I think I'm going to take the over 1.5 on both sides just to play it safe, because I don't see either guy really getting an early finish here. If anything, maybe Ulberg gets a knockout in the second or third, or he could knock out Ozdemir early. Ozdemir has not looked incredible lately, but since USADA has left the picture, I think Ozdemir's resilience has gone up. Say what you will, but yeah, that's my read for the fight. So give me the over 1.5. Probably going to lean on the Ulberg side. All right, so moving down the card, you have Zhang Minyang versus Ozzy Diaz. Listen, man, I don't know what's going on here. They got a bunch of Chinese fighters. There's a lot of Road to UFC finalists. There's only one other fight, maybe 2, on the card that I recognize the names and can provide any substantial, analysis on. And one of those is Niam Jargol Dembrel versus Carlos Hernandez. Carlos Hernandez is a tough fighter, man. He had a loss to Tatsuro Taira not too long ago, but he had a pretty good showing for himself in that fight. Niam Jargol looks like a monster. I do expect this fight to be in the Mongolians' favor. But that being said, Hernandez is very tough, so give me the Mongolian over 1.5. And you have Maheshate versus Nicholas Mota. This is a fight that I really feel can go either way. I think Nicholas Mota has the grappling and striking experience to withstand the early onslaught from Maheshate. And I think Maheshate has the power to knock out Nicholas Mota. So this is a fun fight, and one that I am not going to bet on, but I think will be fun to watch. Right, so let's go down the betting slip for this card. Although there won't be much, there are a couple of fights that I'm interested in. In the main event, I will be taking Petr Yan over 2.5. In the co-main event, I'm going to go over 1.5 on either side. I'm going to take Muslim Salikhov by decision. I'm going to take Wang Kong over 1.5. And I will take the over 1.5 in the Oezdemir Alberg fight. So give me Petr Yan over 2.5, over 1.5 in the Xiaonan Richie fight, Salikhov by decision, Wang Kong over 1.5, and over 1.5 in the Oezdemir Alberg fight. I do expect some of these fights to kind of play out a little bit longer. There's some really tough fighters on here. We're in China, so, you know, there's going to be a little bit of bias from the crowd. There's going to be a little bit of Chinese magic in the air, we can call it. So I expect some of these matchups to be favored towards the Asian or Chinese fighters. Some of the guys that I'm not too familiar with might have an easy run here. You want the hometown guys to win in their hometown, generally speaking. So we'll see what happens. But not an incredible card to bet on, but hopefully one that we can get back in the winning column on. And yeah, thank you so much for watching, y'all. I really appreciate it. Next week, we are going to be talking about Pantoja versus Asakura. Oh, there's a week off. All right. In that week off, I'll be coming with some analysis on the Fighting Nerds team. I'm also going to be talking about some other prospects and things that we have predicted well on this channel. So thank you so much for watching, y'all. Check out the Alexei Oleinik movie, and I appreciate y'all. Much love.